Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 14. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video, we are going to be going over a team that I made based on the team that just won Worlds yesterday. In case you don't know, the Pokémon World Championship was held in Honolulu, Hawaii yesterday, and the finals was a match against an Italian player named Luca Sarabelli, and he was playing a Japanese player named Yuta Ishigaki. And these guys' names are awesome. So just kind of a side thought, but like, man, these guys got some really cool anime names. But obviously, the World Championships of Pokemon was being held with Regulation G rule set, and we are currently looking at a Regulation H rule set, which means that a bunch of Pokemon are not going to apply, so we're going to have to translate them. Them being Rhydon, Ogerpon Hearthflame, Urshifu Rapid Strike, and Iron Hands are now being replaced with Cyclizar, Magmar, Poliwrath, and Hariyama. So starting off with our Cyclizar set here, we have the Thunderbolt in order to keep in with the electric typing, but electric typing is also a good coverage to have because I feel like I've done quite a few videos now mentioning having coverage for Pelipper, but Pelipper is everywhere, so it's important to have coverage for Pelipper. It also fits thematically since Miraidon is an electric type. And then we have the Draco Meteor for some good stab if we want to get it before we leave using our Shed Tail, which is not a signature move. There's two other Pokemon in the game that have it, being Orthworm and Sceptile and Smeargle. But Shed Tail, what you do is you cut down half of your health and then you pass a substitute to another Pokemon, which will be very useful with the Pokemon that we have on the rest of this team. Mostly just Poliwrath, but you can use it in a Hariyama. But we also have the Rain Dance, which, as we'll discuss, we have Poliwrath as our Swift Swimmer, but it's also nice for decreasing the power of Fire-type moves. And we can also interrupt other kinds of weather. If there's like an Alolan Ninetales that wants to get its Aurora Veil, then we can set Rain. And if there's a Sunsetter that wants to just click Eruption, then we can get rid of their Sun there too. And then we have the Covert Cloak items so that we won't be getting faked out by Incineroars. And then we have the Regenerator because Cyclizar really wants to get off an attack maybe with Draco Meteor and then leave with Shed Tail. And since Shed Tail cuts down half of our health but we get a third back with Regenerator, it means that Cyclizar, whenever it comes back into the battle, if it has to come back into the battle, is going to be a lot healthier. Next up, we have Magmar, or Ogerpon Hearthflame replacement, and the main role of the Ogerpon on the Worlds team was that it was redirection, but it was also good damage, and we don't really have one of those outside of Ogerpon, so we just have Magmar as the Fire-type Follow Me replacement. Follow Me is very good for redirecting attacks, and it's good for redirecting physical attackers because of our ability Flame Body, which gives us a 30% chance to burn a Pokemon that we've made contact with. We also have the Clear Smog for removing any stat boosts that the opponent might want to get, and we have the Burning Jealousy in case we need to burn something that is trying to get up stat boost, like Dondozo for example. And since we are a not fully evolved Pokemon, we can run the Eviolite, which will make us extra tanky while we're using Follow Me to redirect all the damage. And we have Terra Grass so that we can Follow Me the Spore, and we won't get put to sleep by a Moongus, so we get to check a Moongus pretty good there. Next up, we have our Urshifu replacement, which is Poliwrath. They are still water fighting types, however, Poliwrath is going to have to play pretty differently than Urshifu here if we want to make it worth. And our Poliwrath set is that we get as much coverage as possible with our two stab moves being Liquidation and Drain Punch. And we also have the Ice Punch so that we can hit things like flying types and grass types reliably. And we have the Belly Drum, which will max out our attack but lose 50% of our health. However, if we can get Cyclizar to Shed Tail into Poliwrath, and we can Follow Me away attacks with Magmar, it means that we can pretty safely get the Belly Drum up with Poliwrath and then be good to go to sweep everything else on the opponent's team. We have the Swift Swim in case we can get a Rain active. However, there's so many Rain teams in the format right now that I wouldn't be surprised if you just run into a Pelipper or a Politoed and get the Swift Swim that way anyways. But it's not super important that we're faster than things since we have the Cyclizar safety net, so keep that in mind. And then we also have the Citrus Berry to get us a little bit of health back after the Belly Drum in case something has like a sound type move or something. And lastly, we're using Terra Fire on this set because fire is really good to not get burned, but it also makes us resistant to grass and fairy types that we were previously weak to. Next up, we have Hariyama, who is the replacement for Iron Hands. You know what, I actually just realized that this is kind of like the Paradox Pokemon at Home team, like part 2, because we have Cyclizar and Hariyama that are trying to imitate Paradox Pokemon. But our Hariyama set is pretty simple. We have the Fake Out because we want to fake... I mean, if you don't know what Fake Out is doing here, then why are you even here? But we have the Close Combat and the Headlong Rush, which will deal massive damage into the opponent, especially once the Flame Orb gives us our Guts ability, which will give us a nice boost. And then we also have the Wide Guard to protect Poliwrath from spread attacks, or anybody on the team from spread attacks, but mostly just Poliwrath. Next up on the team, we have Whimsicott, our first Pokemon that doesn't necessarily need to be replaced. And I think this is the same set, except instead of using the Covert Cloak on the Whimsicott, I decided to give it a Focus Sash, since Cyclizar really treasures having that Covert Cloak a little bit more than Whimsicott. So we gave Whimsicott the Focus Sash, and hopefully it won't be catching any Fake Outs. And if it is really seriously being threatened by Fake Out, we can just go for the Terra Ghost, and we have a pretty standard Whimsicott move pool of Moonblast, which gives us our damage, but we also have the Encore in case we want to mess up something that previously went for a Fake Out that's not a Dark type, because we have our Prankster ability, which will give us priority on all of our status moves, and that also includes the Tailwind for making everything faster. And lastly, on this team, we have the Farigiraf, and Farigiraf is really good because of its Armor Tail ability, which negates all forms of priority. And this Farigiraf set, it's doing alright. You know, you got the Psychic Noise for making it so that the opponent cannot heal themselves, but also to deal good Psychic type damage, as well as they have the Foul Play for anything that tries to raise its physical attack without raising its defense. Then Farigiraf can hit them massively hard. And then we have the Helping Hand for supportive tools in case we have Poliwrath all set up and we just need a little bit of damage for whatever reason. We can Helping Hand into Poliwrath, or Hariyama for that matter, for some good damage, and maybe even Cyclizar with the Draco Meteor or the Thunderbolt. And lastly, in case the opponent wants to go for the Trick Room, we also have the Trick Room option, mostly to help us against teams that are generally faster than us, and we want to have up Trick Room so that we can be slower than them while tricking them into setting up their Tailwind, or just getting rid of Trick Room against teams that are really slower than us, and we don't want them to use the Trick Room against us. And for this Farigiraf set, I decided to go with the Rocky Helmet in order to deal damage into physical attackers and use the Terra Grass so that we're not getting spored by a Moongus, but also because Grass is just a nice defensive typing on Farigiraf. So without further ado, let's get into some battles. Alright, so this first team that we have here is pretty interesting because they have Fire, Water, Grass with Talonflame, Primarina, and Decidueye, but they also have really good offensive tools like the Hydreigon and the Goldengo, and they have the Electabuzz, who is our natural sworn enemy since we're running the Magmar. But let's let this first turn play out. We decided to lead Magmar and Cyclizar, and they decided to lead Talonflame and Primarina, which is pretty alright with me. They go for the Tailwind, and they go for the Hyper Voice to try and deal damage into Magmar as much as possible, and some damage into Cyclizar. We get off our Shed Tail though, because we have enough health, which allows us to swap into Poliwrath. As Magmar goes for the Clear Smog, since I thought there might be a possibility that Primarina will go for the Calm Mind this turn, but we got to Clear Smog away their Throat Spray Burst, which is also nice. We follow me with Magmar, and that causes Brave Bird to go into Magmar, and they Hyper Voice into Magmar and Poliwrath, and it goes through our sub since it's a sound type move. However, we are able to get our Belly Drum up with Poliwrath, and now Poliwrath's sitting pretty good as we now get in Whimsicott, who encores the Primarina into Hyper Voice, as Flare Blitz is taken by the Sash, and unfortunately we get our Tailwind up since they did use Hyper Voice, so it's still a spread attack. Poliwrath gets the Liquidation into the Talonflame, so we just need to stall out one more turn of their Tailwind at least. I bring back in Cyclizar. They decide to just Draco Meteor into Cyclizar, which is pretty understandable, as they just go for the Hyper Voice into Poliwrath, but we Drain Punch into Hydreigon, and that dies instantaneously because of course it does, as we get a lot of our health back, and they have Goldango in the back who decides to Terastallize into Steel, and they make it rain into us, which causes our sub to fade, but they do get a special attack drop, but we get to Liquidation into Goldango, and that takes it out in one hit, as Hyper Voice is dealt into Poliwrath, and Poliwrath doesn't have anything great to hit Primarina. However, the Drain Punch is still strong enough to OHKO, so I thought that they might switch to a Fairy-type move, just in case we didn't KO. But we do KO the Primarina in one hit, so Poliwrath is just good. We also discovered from the previous turn that we were faster than the Primarina, since we got to take the Make It Rain from the Goldango, hit the Goldango, and then Primarina attacked. Alright, this opponent has a pretty interesting team here. The first thing that caught my eye was them using Talonflame and Bramblegast in combination with each other, because that really read to me that they wanted to get up Tailwind first. So we start the game and I lead Whimsicott to maybe counter with my own Tailwind or stagger Tailwinds at least. I have Magmar here just in case. They do go for Tailwind with Talonflame and they try to Sludge Bomb into Whimsicott as we get a little bit of Burning Jealousy damage into Talonflame and Gengar, which is going to make it so that Talonflame doesn't have priority on this next turn and Gengar just takes a little bit of chip because Gengar is kind of frail. I decide to follow me with Magmar and we encore the Talonflame so it's forced to Tailwind for forever. As Sludge Bomb doesn't do all that much damage into Magmar, they swap into Incineroar, but I figured now's a good time to swap into Poliwrath, as now I get up my own Tailwind to stagger Tailwind a little bit, but Gengar goes for Icy Wind, which is a little unfortunate. We bring in Farigiraf here because I knew there was going to be a Fake Out at some point in this game, so we catch the Fake Out and they try to Encore into the Whimsicott slot, but we get up the Belly Drum. But because they revealed the Encore and our speed is down, even though we're in Tailwind right now, they're able to Encore Poliwrath, which is a little annoying. I foul play into Gengar, maybe trying to get some Gengar damage. Trying to get some damage into the Gengar, but I realized immediately the turn after that what I should have done is I should have just Psychic Noise the Gengar, because that probably would have KO'd. So I bring in Magmar because we can't have Poliwrath on the field doing heckin' nothing. And I Psychic Noise the Gengar and that kills it, so that's at least gone. As Torterra gets up the Shell Smash, which is very threatening because now we're outside of Tailwind and Talonflame comes in and they Terra Fire Torterra. I decide to redirect with Magmar hoping that nothing serious happens and they Rock Blast into Magmar, which allows Farigiraf to get up the Trick Room. So now we are in a great spot because the Torterra not only has the speed boost, but they've also Tailwinded, so they are super faster than us, but super slower than us inside of Trick Room. I foul play into the Torterra. I had to do 3 takes of that in case you couldn't tell. And I Clear Smog, and Clear Smog is able to pick up the KO on Torterra as they taunt into Magmar, but Magmar's not the real problem anymore. As they intimidate both of us down, but I can just bring in Whimsicott to die here as I foul play Talonflame for a little bit of damage. They knock off Farigiraf, which is good because Farigiraf's kind of done its job at this point, and they Brave Bird into Whimsicott, which takes out Whimsicott. But they have 1 turn of Tailwind and we have 2 turns of Trick Room left, and I can just keep using Magmar to redirect the damage after I take out Talonflame, because Incineroar is not going to have an easy way through Magmar, which allows me to just use Poliwrath to beat up Incineroar, since they use their Terra on Torterra in order to avoid taking massive, I guess, Fire-type damage from Magmar. Poliwrath takes out Incineroar, and that's going to end the game. Okay, this next game is a bit of an unexpected mirror match, because they have Poliwrath, they have Hariyama, and they have Whimsicott, just like I do. However, they have the Ninetales instead of Magmar, and they have Breloom and Trevenant instead of Farigiraf and Cyclizar. So let's get into this one, because this one's a bit of a weird one. I lead with Magmar and Cyclizar since those are different pieces, but they lead Poliwrath and Hariyama. And I think that they kind of know something that maybe I don't, but I just decided to get off my strategy where I Shed Tail with Cyclizar in order to get our Poliwrath in for free. I'm Burning Jealousy, maybe expecting Poliwrath to also Belly Drum, because that's the main reason that you run Poliwrath is because of Belly Drum. But the Poliwrath is actually slower than Magmar, as the Waterfall comes down to Magmar, but it doesn't really do that much damage. And Hariyama takes its burn turn. I just follow me and get up Belly Drum with Poliwrath, and Poliwrath is faster than both, which is good to know for later. They side coaching into Hariyama, and Hariyama Drain Punch is into Magmar. But the Hariyama hadn't taken any damage that turn, so we're pretty good. As I bring in my Hariyama to fake out their Hariyama, and I kind of wanted to try and KO the Politoed, but we actually crit the Whimsicott with Drain Punch, but that doesn't really come into play because after this, as you'll see, the Whimsicott... What does the Whimsicott do? Oh, the Whimsicott tries to Encore into Hariyama, and I figured that they were going to do that because I faked out. So I decided to just swap into Cyclizar, and if Cyclizar dies, it's perfectly fine at this point. I Drain Punch into Hariyama, and that gets the KO into Hariyama, thankfully, as they bring in Breloom here, and they're actually Bullet Seed on Breloom, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, did I mess up? Because what I did for this turn was I Rain Danced with Cyclizar so that Poliwrath can be faster and match the Whimsicott's Tailwind, and even if the Breloom had a Grass-type move, then it would still break Poliwrath's sub, but we could KO the Breloom. But then I realized that the Breloom is faster than Cyclizar, which can only happen if the Breloom is Choice Scarf. So there's a 50-50 chance that they can KO Poliwrath here, and they only get the 2 hits, which is the worst of the 50-50. As Poliwrath just gets the Ice Punch into Breloom, and Whimsicott goes for the Endeavor into Cyclizar, but it's kind of pointless at this point. And they could be Swift Swim with Poliwrath, however, we'll never know, because my Poliwrath was initially faster than their Poliwrath. So I just decided to Drain Punch in order to take all of its health down, and we get to Thunderbolt into Whimsicott, which doesn't KO it, but it does paralyze it, and then Whimsicott is paralyzed, not exactly enjoying life there. Okay, next up we have our first actual Rain Team counter that we're going to have, but they also have Murkrow, which can keep us from getting up our Belly Drum with Poliwrath, as it'll just get wiped away. That's another reason that we have Thunderbolt on Cyclizar. It's just to maybe get a quick 2-hit KO on Murkrow with the Electric-type moves. But the game starts, and I lead Magmar Cyclizar, and they lead Politoed and Gliscor. And what happens in this turn? Oh yeah, Gliscor protects, and I protected Magmar, and I wanted to try and get a cheeky Draco Meteor into the Gliscor just to deal some damage into it, but it doesn't happen. They Weather Ball into Magmar, but that doesn't KO it. They swap in a Moongus here, but I decided to Terra Grass Magmar in order to redirect and do some Thunderbolt damage into Politoed, and the Weather Ball is caught into Magmar. And with Amoonguss kind of sitting on the field here, we are fine to protect Magmar because we don't need to redirect, since the Politoed would never attack a Water-type move into Cyclizar, and Amoonguss, once we get the Shed Tail off, isn't going to be able to put to sleep Poliwrath once we swap into it. But they hard swap in our Caladon for whatever reason as we get the Shed Tail off, and Poliwrath comes in, and they go for the Spore into the Poliwrath slot probably, but we currently have a substitute up, so it doesn't work. And we're just going to keep continuing to redirect the attacks as Poliwrath gets off the Belly Drum, and we get our Citrus Berry activated. They go for the Electro Shot in Rain, but Magmar takes it like an absolute beast since we're currently Grass-type. Doesn't take the Pollen Puff like an absolute beast though, but that's maybe because that's a crit. So you gotta give a bit of leniency there. But I bring in Hariyama, and I decide to fake out into the Arcaludon slot here, maybe expecting a Terra, but I really wanted to get rid of Amoonguss a little bit more. So we get rid of Amoonguss with the Ice Punch. And we also call the Protect from the Arcaludon, which is super nice, because if we had thrown a Fighting-type move into it, it probably would have led the turn. I Ice Punch into the Arcaludon now that it's weak to us because of its Flying typing. They Focus Blast into Poliwrath and land it, but we get to close combat into Politoed, and that's going to take out Politoed. And last but not least on the field is the Gliscor from earlier. And the Gliscor just decides to waste a turn of ours, maybe trying to stall out the rain or giving us burn damage, but it's kind of pointless at this turn because we can just Liquidation into the Gliscor. Okay, and lastly we have a bit of an interesting rain team here, as they have the rain components of Pelipper, Arcaludon, and Bascu Legion in the back, which can be very threatening, but they also have Mouseape and Goldango, which is a lot of really threatening pieces. They decide to lead the Mouseape, as I decide to lead Whimsicott and Cyclizar, hoping that this would be a threatening enough opening to maybe keep them from going for the Mouseape combo, but thankfully Whimsicott is sashed, so one of the things that could happen is Mousehold like Follow Me's, and then Annihilate tries to get off a Bulk Up, so we could Encore the Mousehold into the Follow Me, and then use Poliwrath once we get the Shed Tail off. Let's see what exactly. Okay, Annihilate does decide to protect, but we get off our Tailwind, and we get the Shed Tail, which means the Poliwrath is going to be faster than both, as Mousehold taunts into Whimsicott, but I'm pretty okay with that now that we have Poliwrath on the field. And they swap Goldango and Arcaludon here, which is a pretty good swap for them, since I tried to take out the Mousehold this turn instead of just going for the Belly Drum. We switch in Hariyama here because I want to use Hariyama to try and delay the Goldango or the Arcaludon getting set up. What they do is they Terra Fairy Arcaludon, but I went for the Belly Drum this turn, so we get to call the Terra, or at least bait the Terra, as they make it rain, and it crits Poliwrath, but as we saw before, it depends how their Goldango is trained about whether or not that mattered. And they Electro Shot without the rain, but we're still in Tailwind, so I just Liquidation into them, and Arcaludon goes away. Make It Rain comes out from Goldango again, but Poliwrath resisted, and Hariyama really doesn't get to do much this game, as we get to bring back in Whimsicott, and I use Mousehold protects for whatever reason, but I use Tailwind with Whimsicott, and we Liquidation into Annihilate, and I think at this point, yeah, the opponent kind of understands that the game is over, since I can just Drain Punch Mousehold, and they would have to do something crazy with Goldango to get Goldango to win the game. Okay, so I want to mention that usually whenever I'm testing a team, I try to win 6 out of 10 battles in order to determine if a team at least has some merit, especially the more gimmicky teams like this one that I kind of just made on the fly. But I won all of these 5 battles in a row, so I figure, like, I think this team is just ready, and it's actually kind of cooking. Sorry to spoil everybody who wants to... You know, actually, me, just put this out later on, so that way nobody knows. But yeah, that was the 2024 World's Reg H conversion team. I'm not exactly how I'm going to title this one, but, I mean, this is what it is. So, I guess I can see why this team won Worlds, because even when you translate it into Reg H, it still goes pretty crazy. Even though none of the pieces are really that much the same, but Poliwrath is actually doing pretty good for itself in this format, I feel like. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, or even consider subscribing, because both of those things help me out an absolute ton. And I will see you in the next one, which might be the second place Worlds team, because, I mean, this team worked out so well. Maybe the second place World team is just as good if you convert it into Reg H, but I'll play around with it, see what happens. Again, thanks for watching. Bye.